Welcome back. This is Chapter 7 from Outcasts. It's the second part in the first book of the Mountain Warrior series. I jolted awake. A pink line formed across the dark and distant jagged mountainous horizon, and I felt a small hope growing in my heart. As the eternal night had worn on, I really thought that dawn would never arrive. My teeth were chattering so loud with my shivering that I thought every zombie in the Forbidden Zone could hear the clicking. Actually, I was so miserable at the moment that I scarcely feared anything, until I had noticed that I had a black cloak laying over me. There was a slight smell of the vampirus from the dreams, the same scent that I thought lingered in my bedroom after I awoke. I swore and stood up with a bolt as I pushed the black cloak away. But I was alone, and if folklore was to be believed, I need not worry about her or any vampires in the light of day. Now that I could see and move without fear of falling off the cliff, I saw that ice was starting to form on the leaves. As I looked closer, I could see that the cuffs on my pants were also freezing. I picked up the vampiress's cloak and wrapped it around me for added warmth. I walked to the edge of the cliff and saw my pack, tent, and supplies strewn about the jagged rocks far below. Oh my God. I wasn't sure if it was God or not in that miserable moment, but I said that as a prayer rather than an oath. God or not, at this point, I definitely believed in hell, as I now stood on hell's summit. I quickly summed up my situation. I had no food, thanks to the bear. I had cut a hole in my tent, so I had no shelter, even if I could find it over the cliff. My clothes, as well as the mysterious black cloak, were soaked, and it was below freezing. Any change of clothes was over the cliff, and probably wet and torn from the bear's ravaging claws. Anything I could use to light a fire was in my pack. I knew that I stood a good chance of slipping into hypothermia and dying in these wet and frigid conditions. And I didn't know where the band of survivors lived who I was seeking for safety. I collapsed in a seated position and fought against weeping. I was a failure. I had no hope but to abandon my adventure if I was to live. It is embarrassing to admit, to almost crying, but this was just a long string of failures in my life. I would be the laughingstock, and this had been my last chance at something better. It was my chance to prove to the world that it was wrong. I could be somebody. Driven by my physical discomfort, the chance of dying in the elements, and hitting another wall of failure, I found myself asking, what was the point of living if I had failed at this latest endeavor? Not even 24 hours into the mission. This was just another disappointment of many notched into my skull. I eased my way down to the edge of the cliff and looked over the ledge. I crept over more so that I stood over a line of jagged boulders far below. I held my breath as something in the darkest recesses of my soul contemplated a jump. It was a brief but horrific flight of fancy. I pushed it from my mind and told myself that most likely a suicide attempt would not be instant. Instead, my shattered body would probably just lie on the sharp boulders as I awaited something to come out of the woods and devour me. Or I would get bit and turn into a zombie and lie there, unable to move, in unnatural life for eternity. Even as a zombie, I'd be a failure. This made me chuckle in morbid humor. I was losing my mind. I sat on the precipice and wallowed in my insanity as the tarnished, dime-sized winter sun stoically rose above me. How long did I stay? I could not tell. The red dawn of light that colored my surroundings slowly turned orange and then a tarnished silvery white. I sat there now, numb to my shivering. It annoyed me that I had those suicidal thoughts, even for a moment. I could be impulsive, but that new and sudden impulse worried me. No, I told myself. I had to find my pack and continue somehow. I still had my body cam. I must make it work. I needed a documentary. I was here. Something deep inside me that I didn't know I had propelled me to stand and walk, first around the precipice, of course, and then downhill. I needed my backpack with a change of clothes. I followed the ledge until I came to a more gradual slope. I recognized a rock formation that looked like an old bearded man contemplating the seeming eternity of the mountains. On the way down, I mostly slipped on the icy leaves, fell and caught myself on the nearest tree trunk or branch. I would let go of the branch, slip, fall, catch myself again, and repeat and repeat. I went into a trance in this manner and lost track of where I was. I soon became numb to the thrashing I received from the plummeting through the trunks and branches. I had no idea where my pack would be. I had trouble forming thoughts. I was dying of exposure, I slowly and dumbly realized. My clothes were still coated with ice. I consciously resigned myself to the failure of the mission and simply stumbled downhill to the fence and my way out of this mess. I wanted a hot, very hot cup of coffee more than anything in the world. I didn't care if it was 99.9% cut by dandelion roots either. Without my gear, I realized I had to return to civilization. I had to sneak across the fence in order to survive. A drone checked me out for a moment, hovering just out of arm's reach. The camera head of it cocked back and forth, like a child pondering if a goofy uncle was a good or a bad guy. I had a flash of annoyance, but then the drone seemed to be a companion of sorts. I tried talking to it, because I was tiring of mad conversations with myself, but it cocked itself again and flew away. Apparently, I was not that interesting. It was noon when I stumbled up to the fence. I would have hugged it, but I remembered the razor wire and the raging electricity. I looked, and 50 yards away to my left was the rock formation with a boulder doing the balancing act over the area that hid the steel pipe that would lead to my freedom. I was grateful for finding it so easily. It wasn't woodsmanship or even dumb luck. Yesterday I had simply walked uphill against gravity. Today I had simply followed gravity by falling back to where I started. But somehow it seemed that the downhill walk, controlled fall, wore me out more than the uphill climb. I made my way to the pipe and slumped to the ground and slithered into the hole. I didn't try too hard to cover the back entrance. I didn't care about anything other than getting back to my real life and accepting a fate of a life with no ambitions. Hot coffee, I said to encourage myself as I crawled through the freshly spun spider webs and dirt in the pipe. I pushed the sticks and leaves out of my way to exit and climbed out. I stood up, brushing spider webs and other debris off my body. I looked straight ahead, thinking of my next move, but instead I stared straight into 3 gun barrels. Behind the 3 armed soldiers in biohazard suits sat a 5-gallon gas can for my imminent funeral pyre. I closed my eyes and waited for the impact of the bullets.